Hello, listeners. This is the Risky Planner Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Hey, Albert.
Hey, Nate.
Nice to see you again.
Yeah, you too, man.
Ready to record?
I am.
Yeah, so am I. This is going to be... So today is quite a technical topic, but pretty relevant.
I mean, anybody who's ever made a budget, which kind of includes me, I guess. I should admit to this, but I'm not exactly a budgets guy. I say it all the time that I'm much better at managing other people's money than my own. But anyway, we're talking about annualized budgets, Nate.
Yeah, that resonates. I mean, I'm not really a budget guy either. You know, like when I was young, I told Captain Habermeyer, my dad, the submariner.
He of the
I was like, hey, Dad, I need some money for blah, blah, blah. And he was like, go get a job.
Yeah.
And so my first job didn't actually pay me any money.
Oh, really?
I was shoveling horse poop, clean up stalls.
Nice.
All summer long, I got to ride the horses.
You know, you just described
cool.
You just described a solid 10 years of my life.
Yeah.
I grew up in, I'm going to say, extreme suburban Texas, where it's
extreme suburban. Yeah.
Meaning anybody who wandered into my neighborhood would mistake it for a rural part of the world. And that's really not. Like I was, 30 minutes from Houston, but we had acreage, we had horses, and my chores involved restocking their food and mucking out their stalls and brushing them and making sure that one time we had has nothing to do with annualized budgets, but I feel like I have to tell
okay.
this story.
We're going to get there, folks.
Well, we will. But first, I want to tell you about the one time that my next door neighbor used a Colt Python to shoot a copperhead snake to death in our feed room one day.
That sounds so Texas.
Dude, it was nuts. Like, this is the same neighbor. One time we had a copperhead. Sorry, I said that was the cottonmouth. We had a cottonmouth in our pond.
Oh, okay. A cottonmouth, the snake.
No, these are two separate issues. This is two separate things. They both happened with the same neighbor. Okay. So this guy wandered over, like my older sister said she'd seen a cottonmouth in our lake. And so Mr. Waldschmidt from next door comes over with a shotgun, like a pump shotgun, and just starts peppering the lake until the cottonmouth just kind of surfaces. But later, my mom was moving hay around and saw what she thought was a mushroom until it hissed at her. And so she ran into the house, and we wound up, calling Mr. Waldschmidt because Mr. Waldschmidt is the most dangerous man I've ever met in person. And he showed up with his revolver, a big black Colt Python, and just started going to town on that poor copperhead and blew like 3 or 4 holes in the side of the feed room, chased that thing behind the barn into our woodshed where he finally put the one in it that killed it. But that happened.
That is wild.
Isn't that crazy?
And I wouldn't be surprised if this man went on flights and just brought his gun with him and nobody checked, because back in the day they didn't.
Because he's definitely a U.S. Marshal.
Yeah, because he's I'm just going to do whatever I want.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised. This always comes to mind for me when I think about things like this. Do you remember Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark?
Yeah.
I love that movie.
Yeah, it's great.
There's a scene in there where they're having some kind of conversation about being prepared, and Indy just tosses a revolver into his suitcase. Just yeah, that's me being prepared. It's you getting arrested by the TSA, Indy. What are you doing?
Yeah, that had nothing to do with budgets. But
no, nothing.
The snakes got their own. They
did.
They got God.
They got God.
All right, so today we're going to talk about annualized budgets, aren't we, Albert?
We are.
Yeah.
It's something that you can't get away from if you're in capital project space. A lot of organizations set up their capital portfolios with an annualized funding scheme and budget program. It's not my favorite thing.
And you can't. And it seems like every time our team is talking about budgets, this is a problem that nobody's solved.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? It's just an ongoing issue. Every client we've worked with, there's conversations about budgets, about optimizing, and it really boils down to schedule.
It does.
Yeah, every project seems to blow their budget. It's not a sexy topic, but it's definitely a topic that every client of ours and every capital project owner operator needs to think about.
It is.
Why is that?
Yeah, I mean, the why is a really, really, really big question, right? I mean, or you hinted at something earlier, like everybody is facing this problem of like annualized. And by the way, I think for a little bit of table setting, we should probably explain what we mean when we say an annualized budget, right?
Yeah, let's do that.
Because it makes sense to think about. First off, most projects take multiple years. Okay, I say most large projects take multiple years. So the ones where you would need to develop like a bottom up estimate and a big old schedule and do baselining and change control and all that stuff. Most of them don't have a single year window necessarily. Most of them are multiple years. So you would need to divide your spending plan, if you want to put it that way, somehow. So you may as well pick the year, right? Also, the organizations that execute projects have some kind of yearly, stewardship that they're required to do, often by law, right? So like fiscal year reporting, either to shareholders or to the government or both. Like there's taxation stuff that comes into it. So you're definitely already carving dollars up into annual tranches. So it makes natural, logical sense to take your project budgets and do the same thing.
When do you start with that process, or where do you start with that process?
Well, that varies a lot from organization to organization. But first, let me just make clear what I'm not talking about. Okay. So what I'm not talking about is if you have a big old project that's going to take 3, 5, 10 years to do, and you are reporting on it annually, but you've got the whole budget approved in advance. You've done life cycle planning. You're doing gate checks. You're getting the funding released in tranches as you approach and pass various gates in your stage gating plan. That's not what I'm talking about. Okay. Because that is responsible stage gate front end loading project stewardship. What I am talking about is when the budgets and indeed the scope of execution for any given year are locked up behind annual fences, right? And that happens a lot, especially for portfolios of much smaller projects.
It's helpful to differentiate between what you're not talking about, what we are going to talk about today. What's the problem? Like if you were going to summarize the problem that we're going to talk about today or unpack a little bit, what is it?
So the problem is, most CapEx projects don't achieve their goals. We've talked about that a lot on this show. Most are behind on schedule, most run over on cost, and often those things are related to each other. So, some research by McKinsey, by the way, we've probably given like 5 different sets of statistics for this because it depends on which research you're looking at.
That's right.
But if you don't fence it by cost, like McKinsey did some research on this, and they found that projects typically take about 20% longer and are 80% over budget. 80, right? Now, 20% to me feels a little bit light. I think yes, because the really, really big projects typically will run 2, 3, 4, 500% behind schedule. And often the ones that don't have this massive schedule overage, they have a correspondingly large cost overage. So something like the Olympics, for example, like that's one of Bent Flyberg's favorite whipping horses. Whipping horses?
It is.
Is that a thing?
Yeah. Whipping horse? Whipping post.
Whipping
post.
You're
from Texas. You should know that.
I really should.
That feels like a very Texas
I'm the one who
metaphor.
told the gun snake story. But anyway.
Yeah. Whipping post.
Sure. It's one of Ben Flyberg's
whipping
favorite.
Boy? I don't know. Now you lost me.
Whipping objects. And
you lost me. Hello.
Yeah, it's just like that famous movie. Anyway. So he sums it up as mega projects are, quote, over budget, over time, over and over. And he's right. Like they tend to run massively behind. And like one of his favorite examples of this is the Olympics, right? Every time a city signs up for the Olympics, they're like, it's going to cost X and generate Y in revenue. And X is always too small and Y is always too big. Every single time, without fail. But the Olympics don't change the date because your city can't pull its crap together and get their project done, right? So instead of compromising on schedule, which lots of projects will do, the Olympics projects tend to compromise on cost and quality. So they don't deliver quite what they were supposed to, and it costs way more than it was planned for. So those factors, the fact that most projects, like their initial plan is unachievable, is one of the main underlying forces of why annualized portfolios just bust every time.
Yeah, we've talked about schedules a lot.
Yeah,
on this podcast and on our insights page on our website.
Yes.
At dokanish.com. But yeah, this schedule and achievability has been an ongoing topic or an ongoing thread of conversation.
It is. And like a lot of organizations that use a mature or semi-mature risk management paradigm will have some kind of cost contingency that they carry on all their projects. Often it's based on like a flat percentage. Like our projects at this gate carry 10% contingency or 5% contingency. And it's a rare organization that actually does the same thing for schedule. Where, you know, if you have like saying 10% contingency is the same thing as saying, for every $100, I'm going to carry an extra 10, right? So that's, you know, basic percentile math. Why am I talking about that? Because the one time that I've seen schedule contingency managed in this way was with ExxonMobil, where for their upstream development projects, for every year on the schedule, they put in 3 months of contingency, early doors. Okay,
Yep.
That's 25% contingency against schedule. And I don't think ExxonMobil they're not exactly new kids on the block when it comes to building big things. So, you know, they know that schedules tend to run behind, but lots of other organizations just don't do that.
Is there, like, if everybody's getting this wrong, maybe wrong is too strong of a word. Like, everyone is facing this problem. Why isn't it fixed yet?
Well, I mean, I think it boils down to two main answers. It's a really good question, right? Because everybody's, you know, taking all of their small to medium-sized projects and jamming them together into these capital portfolios that bust every single year over and over again forever, all right? Maybe there's 3 answers. Let me start with the first one, which is one that we've already given. Like, project performance generally is bad, right? Like, as project controls professionals, we collectively, meaning the entire universe full of us, have not been doing a great job of controlling cost and schedule on projects. So you should expect that any given project, whether it's behind an annual fence or not, is going to have the same kinds of projects that all capital projects do. It's going to run over on schedule, which is going to push at least some of its spend into unplanned fiscal years or outer years, as we call it.
Why do you think that we don't do a good job?
Well, I think there's an under-reliance on risk management, especially as it pertains to schedule. You know, I was talking earlier about that percentage bank style of contingency estimation, which often leaves schedule out entirely. That's really not a smart way of doing your contingency management, because you need to include at least some schedule contingency. Like, we have a client who's been doing work for a public sector. I don't want to give away the names here, but like, we have a public sector contract.
We could tell you, but we'd have to kill you.
We'd have to kill you. And we don't want to do that. We love you too much. So we have this client that works for a public sector entity and has missed every single milestone that they've set out for themselves because they included no schedule contingency, and they failed to recognize that early plans by their contractors were going to be wildly optimistic. We're not going to take preventable and predictable delays into consideration, things like resource constraints and access to buildings, which is really difficult anywhere, but especially in the public sector. So, you know, there's just lots and lots of factors that go into that. But like, poor schedule risk management is a big, big chunk of it. So the second reason is it actually makes perfect sense to carve funding up annually, right? I mentioned earlier, there's lots of different reasons why projects organizations need to think about their cash flow in annual terms, right?
Yeah.
So it's tempting to mate that annualized budget up with a specific scope that you're going to execute in that year. You probably have stakeholders that want to know that, right? Like, they want to know, what are they going to get? Like, if you're spending $10 billion next year, what are they going to get for that? Like, that's a perfectly reasonable thing to want, you know? So locking everything up behind an annualized budget is the wrong way to address that very reasonable concern, but it is one of the most common ways.
All right. So are you saying that the results of the overall project versus the results of, you know, the output of that 1 year is a better metric for how well that money is being spent? You're
bang on. The results of the overall project are exactly what organizations and their stakeholders should be looking at, right?
But we don't.
Well, we do and we don't, right? When we get close, so these kinds of projects, like, part of the reason why they have, by the way, annualized projects are actually worse than average at delivering on their stated objectives, and this is part of the reason why. The GAO, like the U.S. Government Accountability Office, did a whole bunch of research on this in the 90s and found that this kind of budget like fencing, not only does it increase the likelihood that projects will fail, it also it like encourages scope creep, right? Because a lot of annualized budgets take what's known as a use it or lose it approach. So a use it or lose it budget means that like if you budgeted that $10 billion and you only spent 9 and it's September, and like your fiscal year is over in a month, then you need to find a way to spend or at least
tough luck, kid.
$1 billion. Yeah, exactly. Or else next year your budget is $9 billion.
That's the professional terminology.
Yeah, tough luck, kid. Sorry, Junior.
Yeah, sorry, Junior.
We're taking your allowance down to $9 billion.
There's no way that I would never spend that much money.
Oh, Nate, I think if you and I put our heads together, we could find a way.
Anyways, yes. Sorry, let's cut that out.
No, I don't think so. I don't think I am going to cut that out. But anyway, so I know, right?
There it is.
There it is.
Okay, so let's get back to it. So we talked about number 2 was that, but now you're talking about use it or lose it, I think.
Yeah, the use it or lose it thing. I mean, it encourages scope creep because when you get to that cliff, right, where you realize that you've underspent and you have to find a way to commit the rest of your annualized budget, a lot of low quality purchases will sneak past the goalie, right? So projects are typically approved when they're on a total life cycle basis. They're approved based on their measurable results, right? Like I'm building my new factory because it's going to sell lots more widgets than the old one, and I'll recoup my losses in 3 years, and they won't be losses anymore. They'll be profits, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's how projects are supposed to be measured. So when you put an annual fence around it, then suddenly the metric isn't did you spend it on something that's going to achieve high ROI? It's did you spend it at all? Right. So,
most budgets are on that clip, like that rotation.
In terms of total capital dollars spent, I don't know whether most budgets are.
Well, public sector, I mean, government.
A lot of public sector is that way.
100% is always annualized.
It is, but even they
almost always.
Even they have some kind of total life cycle planning angle that they take when they're doing the really, really big stuff. But like the danger of the annualized stuff is that, it might even be true that the most dollars get spent not on an annualized basis, but most projects probably are done that way. Because if you think about it, a lot of really small projects are happening all around you all the time, right? And a large percentage of them are probably drawing from a municipal budget or a provincial or state budget or a government budget of some kind that is in fact annualized, right? It's driven by tax revenue. It has to be reported on a fiscal year basis. So all this money has to get spent. And like, if you've ever noticed a surge of construction work in a season when it really doesn't seem to make sense to do that, it's because they're trying to spend their use it or lose it annual budget, most likely.
That kind of feels like the whole renaming of the Department of Defense to the Department of War is a use it or lose it.
Well,
sorry, when you were going through it, all I could think about was that.
Well, that is going to cost a lot of money. I mean,
it is.
No one involved in that
is
decision.
very expensive.
It is very expensive. And
anyways, that was what you put in my head.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I could get you thinking about the Trump administration. That's
Department of War.
Yeah, exactly. It's the service I provide. But no, this actually brings me cleanly to that third thing I was going to talk about. Right? Like that use it or lose it mentality of like sneaking in low quality things. Like I'm not saying that all rebrands are bad, Nate, because I know you've done some great ones. But they're not necessarily the highest ROI thing you could spend your project's budget on. It really depends on what your initial, you know what I mean? Like you're supposed to plan around what you spend. Yep. It shouldn't just be a rush to the end. But a lot of projects organizations will look at their year-end results in retrospect and think, oh, we did a great job. We spent 98% of our budget. Right? Like we did it, pats on the back. We've had sales calls like, you, me and our mutual friend Amr with new prospective clients who tell us that their CapEx performance is great, that every year they meet their spending targets, right? And then we say, oh, well, that's really amazing. Like, how are you doing that? And what they eventually will say is like, well, we massively changed the scope. It's like,
yes. Oh yeah.
Yeah. I bet you hit your targets.
I'm a marketing guy and I hear that and I go, yeah, that means nothing.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not possible that, all of these, because like on the one hand, they took a call from us, right? Like we do process improvement and capital project controls. Exactly. So why'd you take a call from us if you're so good? Yeah. Yep. There's something wrong here. But that is the third reason, right? Like a lot, and our clients do the same thing. They look retrospectively at last year and think, hey, we hit all of our spending targets. We must be doing something right. Well, you break it down on a per project basis, it doesn't look so pretty.
You've talked a little bit about the symptoms of this, of the annualized budget and the problems that occur. Well, like, what are we proposing? How do we want to change things?
Well,
is that a bad question?
It's not. No, I mean, here's the.
I debated asking it.
No,
it seems so large.
It's a big question. It's not a bad question, but it is a big question. And the truth is that there are better ways of doing it, and none of them are even all that new, right? Like, it's not like I'm going to sit here and tell you that we need to use AI to do it. We don't. Okay, we have lots of different ways to do this. The one that I personally,
it's called Excel.
That's right. Just learn how to use Excel, noob. What's wrong?
Yeah.
You don't know how to VLOOKUP? Whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, no, unfortunately, improved use of Excel is merely how you will do it, not what you will do.
Yes.
But yeah, so my personal favorite answer to this question of how do we stop doing this the wrong way is to basically stop assigning scope to your annualized budget, right?
Right.
Like, all those organizations I was talking about earlier, my reason 3, in retrospect, we look really good because we spent all of the money that we planned to. Well, cool. Then maybe that should be your goal, actually, is to spend a certain amount of money, right? And instead of aligning it with specific projects, for example, you might have a refinery with an annualized debottlenecking program. And instead of saying, well, this year we're going to do the decoker expansion, right? Instead, you say, well, this year we're allocating this much money to the debottlenecking program.
So it's a mindset shift.
It's not just that.
A little bit.
It's not just that, because let's take that decoker expansion project as an example.
Yeah, please.
Okay. So do you know what a decoker is?
Nope.
Okay. So petroleum coke. Have you ever driven by?
I was trying to imagine what it is, and I was like, all I could see was, I don't know, some kind of smelting operation.
You're not super far off, like, because petroleum coke is used in smelting, but as an input, not as an output. Okay.
Right.
So petroleum coke is. I'm not a chemical engineer, nor am I a petroleum engineer, so I'll tell it to you in layman's terms. It's the particly black stuff that you pull out of oil to make it refinable. Yeah. Okay, so if you've ever driven by a refinery and you see a big old tower of
pile.
Like jet black stuff, like that's petroleum coke. And in order to do certain kinds of to produce certain kinds of outputs from your petroleum, you have to get all that stuff out of there, right? It and sulfur are two of the main things that you have to pull out of crude oil to make it usable.
Right.
And by the way, the sulfur is right next to the giant black pile is the giant yellow pile, right?
Right.
So anyway, if you want to produce more usable products from your crude oil, then you pull more coke out faster and you can do more with the crude that you have. Okay. So a decoker expansion is a good way to debottleneck your facility and make more, light olefins or gasoline or diesel or whatever.
Yeah.
So if you say, I'm going to do that, that's a great idea. You should do that. And this coming year, you say, I'm going to do the decoker expansion. Well, there's all kinds of things that can go wrong with the decoker expansion, right? Perhaps you have a piece of dependent work that gets delayed and you can no longer do it during the season when it would be most efficient to. Perhaps something else crops up that would be even better ROI and you could execute even faster. Perhaps the relevant subject matter experts they get furloughed or they have to take a sabbatical or, they have a death in the family or, there are all kinds of things that are like, as soon as you start getting specific, there are resource constraints and weather constraints and timing constraints and all those things, all these risks that can crop up on your project and stop you from doing the decoker expansion. But what they don't stop you from doing is other projects in the debottlenecking program. Okay. So this is called lean and continuous budgeting, is the idea that you allocate things to a program of related works instead of to a specific project. And you say, I want to execute elements from that program to the tune of $9 or $10 billion this year.
But it sounds like you're just given free rein to spend the money on X, but you're not really defining what you're going to do.
Well, yes, that's exactly right. I mean, now it's a little more limited than you're making it sound, which brings me to point B. The key, like the secret sauce here, is quarterly planning or monthly even. Like instead of having a big end of year let's do the budget for next year. Let's figure out all the projects we're going to do. We're going to carve it all up. We're going to put them on a Gantt chart. We're going to cash flow it out. We're going to spend $10 billion. Decoker expansion goes right there on the list, right? Like that's a really tempting way to do it. If you go with a lean and continuous budgeting approach, then instead of that, you take the decoker expansion off the board, put a big old line that says, capacity enhancement or debottlenecking projects. And then in your first planning meeting, you talk about all of the things that could consume that budget and how much they could consume and under what. And then you do that again next month or next quarter. And you keep doing it until you get closer to execution. And the whole point here is to spend as much time in planning as you reasonably can so that when you actually start executing them, you're ready to rock and roll. So if you are meeting these annual budgets on a quarterly basis and you're like coming together as a group, like the same way you would do with your annualized, budget planning committee, bring those same people together quarterly and review more time limited data, right? Like give yourself a time horizon, set your fence even tighter, and plan more precisely within that next upcoming quarter time. So you're doing rolling. That's the continuous part of the lean and continuous budgeting. Lean means you're only taking little bitty bites of it, and continuous means you're doing that on a much more regular, recurrent basis than you would under a typical annualized program. So that's my answer to your question.
And is that a common practice or is that uncommon? Are you proposing? It's like you did say at the beginning, like some of these are not new. But is this something we're proposing that's not common?
Well, this is the kind of thing that you would typically find in the world where lean is already very much how they do things, right? Like in manufacturing, for example, a lot of manufacturing projects, like every factory in the world needs a gigantic pile of projects done inside of it each year, right? And a lot of them use this style of program or portfolio level funding that they then carve up, monthly or quarterly or whatever as they go. So it's in heavy use there. But this is one of the things that I found the least research basis for, right? I mean, I could find a lot of examples of consultants like you and me saying that it's a good idea, right? And like citing some hypothetical statistics, but you don't see a lot of large organizations talking about how they did such a great job with their annualized budget because they adopted a lean, budgeting paradigm because they haven't, right? So it's hard to find example cases of it. And I wish more companies would try it.
Yeah, it seems like a reasonable proposal. So how do I, if I'm in a PMO and I'm sort of planning, we're stuck on the whole blowing budget cycle, let's call it.
Yeah.
Like, where am I starting? How do you start to turn the ship?
Well, those big annual budgeting meetings I was talking about are one answer to that question. There should be one. There should be several, right? And even if there is one, there's other things, there's other levers we can pull to make those meetings more effective. But it has to start there, right? Like personally, we have a client who falls into this trap every single year with their environmental remediation projects. And I want to tell them that it's okay if they just don't assign scope to their projects anymore. If they just show up to the meeting and say, we know how much we're going to spend, we don't know what we're going to spend it on, let's plan the next quarter, and then we'll come back in a quarter and do it again. That's the only difference that they have to do. That's it, right? It's a very, very small change, but it requires administrative buy-in, right? Like whoever the boss's boss who goes and actually talks to the government or whoever the ultimate client is about what you guys got done in any given year and what you're planning to do next year, that person has to have, to be crass, a set, right? They have to be willing to go talk to people.
It is bold, right?
It is bold.
To propose that. Yeah. Like, how are you going to talk to the board about that? They're going to say, well, what are we getting?
Yeah.
What's happening?
Now, what's funny is a lot of organizations who would be a little bit concerned about taking the I don't know what I'm going to spend your $10 billion on message to their bosses, which again, understandable. But a lot of those same organizations will happily adopt agile practices like Scrum for their IT projects. Okay. Mm-hmm. One of the foundational principles of Scrum is that you can't predict at the beginning of a project what your scope is.
Right.
So applying agile principles to larger portfolios and different, like the kinds of capital projects that don't typically use agile methodologies. Like I'm not saying that every capital project should use Scrum because they shouldn't, frankly. But at taking that same mindset of, I know what you're going to get at the end of the year. It's this much worth of value, right? Like we're going to take all of these money that you've given us and we're going to spend it on something valuable. I guarantee it. In fact, we're going to do a better job this year than we did last year of delivering value for you. And the way we're going to do that is by doing it as we go. Instead of lying to you about what we'll do in the next 12 months, we'll tell you the truth about what we'll do in the next 3 months. And then we'll do it again 3 months later.
That's a bold statement.
It is.
Yeah.
Feels good to me, though.
I'm just trying to think, if I were to tell my daughter that she could just that would never work in personal life. But yeah, giant projects worth $10 billion. Sounds like it would work. But good luck telling that constituents. Let's say if you're, on the political side, if you're, kind of creating the budget that gives the money to these projects, there's a lot of buy-in that has to happen.
That's right.
This becomes like a lot of stakeholder engagement.
It does. Yeah. And like, if you're a project manager, your job is not to manage the technical elements of your project. Your job is to manage people, right? You're a communications and interface manager, and you probably have technical people who will do the really nitty-gritty stuff for you, right? So project managers are already stakeholder communications and interface managers. They just have to kick that sensibility into overdrive in order to take this paradigm and make it work. But there's a fair case to be made that it's not going to fit with every organization, right?
Yeah.
But there probably will be some where the executives are like, not good enough. Like, we actually do need to know what you're going to do in the next 12 months. And I have an answer for that one too, actually.
What is the answer?
Well, I'm so glad you asked. We're playing T-ball here.
Yeah, exactly.
But basically, I was talking earlier about underutilization of schedule risk management practices is a big root cause here.
Yeah.
So use them. I mean, instead of saying, well, we're going to do the decoker expansion in the first 6 months and, some other thing in the next 6 months, actually subject those to an early doors risk assessment to tell you, okay, what is that 6 months really? And maybe it's parametric. Maybe you have a bunch of other projects. You can use reference class forecasting to say like, well, all of our other expansion projects in this size class went over by 30% on their schedule. So it's not 6 months, it's 9, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you don't plan for that spend to happen on the shortest possible timeline. You plan for it to happen on the most likely possible timeline, right? Because what happens, let's say I want to spend $10 per month for the rest of for like the next calendar year. How much money am I planning to spend?
120.
That's correct. Well done.
Okay. Yeah, I was like, wait a second.
Boy.
Is there a trick? Yeah, okay.
Nate was not expecting to do math today.
Woo. I passed.
You did. Now, what happens if
my son would call me a dummy or something, or simple math?
I don't know. You got there though. You got the right answer. That's the main thing.
A ding dong.
So what happens if
cool.
I spend?
I passed.
Well, you did.
Yeah. Let's go back. What point are you making?
Here's the point. Okay, what happens if I spend $8 per month instead? How much money have I spent then?
Ooh.
You want me to do it for you?
$96.
It's $96. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So 96 minus 120 is a shortfall of $24.
That's lunch.
It's something, right?
It is.
So here's the difference between taking a risk impacted view of your schedule versus a non-risk impacted view. All right.
Okay, do it.
If you are in this exact same scenario, right? $10 per month. If I'm planning to do that, and I have a specific set of scopes attached to each of that, $10 every single month, and all those scopes predictably run behind by this amount where I'm only spending $8 per month instead, right? At the end of the year, I have a shortfall of $24. And that's not a whole lot of money, but multiply that by 1 million and you're talking about the actual kinds of money that we're talking about for these kinds of capital programs. And you don't want a $24 million shortfall at the end of the year, right? That's like a big chunk of your year. So you take that 24 and instead of saying, I'm definitely going to spend it on these things and then failing, you either have that as, side cash for those little tap on projects that you might bring in during the year, or you simply plan more projects, right? So like, let's say that $120 was set aside for 4 projects, right? $30 each. $24 will buy you basically a whole other project. So instead of taking 4 projects and running them on the most aggressive possible timeline, you take 5 projects and run them on a risk-adjusted timeline. So you still plan to spend the full amount of money. You just smear it out over a longer period of time.
Smear it out.
Yeah.
It just sounds like you're being much more efficient with execution, and therefore, or ergo, you have another project that you can throw in there.
Yeah, exactly. And that, by the way, it goes down much more smoothly with management than I don't know what we're going to spend your money on. If you say, not only am I going to spend the money on these 4 things, I'm going to get you a 5th thing, right? I'm like, oh, wow, amazing. It's like the fact that some of those projects are going to leak into next year was going to happen anyway, but now you can execute on more things at once.
So just for the sake of an example, I'm going into a meeting with my boss and I'm going to propose this $96, so $10 a month, $8 a month. Like, what am I taking into that meeting? How am I preparing for that conversation?
That will, again, depend on the organization, but for the ones that need you to tie, okay, so I guess we can break our executive teams into 2 here, right?
Sure.
Ones that are comfortable with the more agile, lean, continuous budgeting approach where you can't be sure about the year, and the other ones where you need to be sure, right? I think the first ones, we know what you bring in. You bring in a quarterly plan, and then you bring in a plan to make more plans, right? And if you have if you have the good fortune of having a planning manager as your boss, then they'll probably buy into that, right?
Yeah.
But if instead, yours got a business degree, then, woe is thee, and, you're going to have to actually explain yourself. And that brings me to group 2. Okay. For that group, you do have to say which projects they are, right? And I take the approach of like, if you have that initial 12-month budget that you put together, like the $10 per month for 12 months, $120 total, and you knew how that was carved up in your brain when you set it out there, I would suggest bringing that and then overlaying on top of it. This is what the risk impacted schedule means. All right. So in previous years, we've had
kind of looking at it side by side.
Exactly. So you can say, okay, well, in previous years, we've had this amount of overrun. So we can count on 30% or so of our funding actually getting spent next year, right? Not this year, but next year, because of predictable and unpredictable delays. But it racks up to about 30%. Using that extra 30%, starting in May or June or whenever, we can kick off a 5th project and get it started early, so that we're using the cash that's locked up by the other 4 projects operating more slowly to start a 5th project.
It sounds like just making a really good business case.
It is making a good business case. That's exactly what it is. I mean,
like, you can't argue. Kill them with numbers, or, essentially, you can't argue with that. All right. So what's one piece of advice that you would give, our audience that are thinking about, improving the annualized budget process?
Yeah. Well, as we hinted at over the course of this recording, it's hard, right? Like it's hard for lots of good reasons and some bad. So I think the easiest thing to do is pick the low-hanging fruit and go after the bad reasons, right? Get yourself acquainted with your own organization's historical data, right? Be able to answer the question of how far behind you typically run on these annualized programs and how much money is being left on the table each year, to be picked up by these low-quality buys or unplanned things. Like, you shouldn't be spending, and this is the other thing we didn't talk about during the episode, by the way, like when you push money out of the current year into outer years, it's not like the money disappears from the projects. You're still going to have to spend it. You just no longer have any visibility into it, right? That's another thing, by the way, that the GAO found. They did a big analysis of like naval yards that were building ships for the Navy. And they found that rather than, the annualized budgets controlling spending, they're actually causing spending to go wildly out of control because no one ship that was being built could accurately predict how much that ship was going to cost in total. So there was a time in the 90s, I was living in the US at the time. I don't know if you were, but like in the 90s, like it made the news a lot about how much all the time. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Like, and there was a specific class of ships, like the I can't remember what they're called, like the missile destroyers.
Yeah, we called them skimmers. Because my dad was a submariner, he talked about skimmers. Yeah. Like, these are surface ships,
vessels,
and like they were basically getting finished, and they were already obsolete by the time that they were getting finished.
Because they were taking so long, and the costs were just absolutely out of control. And so, by the mid 90s, this was like a massive political issue. And when the GAO did its analysis, they were like, the way that things are set up is it's like forcing project managers to misreport numbers, right? So that's a really easy low hanging fruit, is to just go find out what the real data says. And the real data lives in the past, not in the future. So you go figure out what your historical data says about your history of doing these kinds of projects on time and on budget. You're going to find that it's not great, right? But put a number to it. Earlier, I used an example of 30%. Like on average, we're 30% behind. You need to know what your number is. So that, and this brings me to a thing too, so that when you go have that conversation with executives and figure out which of those two branches you're in, right? Like, are your executives going to be open to the idea of like a continuous planning, or are they not, right? Do they need to see a scope-based program? You can start preparing for that conversation if you know how far behind you typically are. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the first thing to do, is just get your arms around your historical data.
All right. Excellent advice. All right. Well, thanks, Albert.
Yeah, thank you, Nate. It was a good one.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you later.
Hey everybody, it's Albert here. Thanks for tuning in to the Risky Planner podcast. We hope today's conversation was informative and above all else inspires you to excellence in what you do. If you like today's episode, don't forget to rate, subscribe, and leave a review. It helps us reach more listeners just like you. I'd also like to thank Thompson Igbo for letting us use his excellent music on our show. If you like what you hear, check him out at igbomusic.com. That's EGBO music.com. Talk at you later.
Oh, was that a cue?
I mean, we're having a conversation, Nate. I don't know.
Yeah. I thought you were going to tell me another story about guns and snakes.